around and drown. Out this way, doing all these shows. I've been on the road, I don't care where I go, as long as I get paid. That little vibe, she been on my mind. Soon as I get back, she get slayed. Do this all the time.
Then we're going to watch a debate, and then tomorrow I'm doing 9/11.
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
Welcome back into the Door Report, episode 281 on a late but lovely Tuesday evening, September 10th, 2024. I am Will Byrum, joined as always by my co-host Trevor Hulan, aka Hack Squat Jim Duggan, and if you can see her on YouTube through the helmet's face mask, we are also joined by our producer, Phoebe. Here at the Door Report, we are presented by 615 Collectibles. If you're into sports cards or sports memorabilia, check out 615 Collectibles on eBay for an unmatched selection of sports cards. Inventory is updated daily with items such as graded cards, team packs, and more. Shipping is always fast and free. Trevor, we have quite a bit of football to dig into here. We have a recap of a Doors dub. Vanderbilt dominates Alcorn State 55-0 last Saturday. And we're looking forward to Vanderbilt's first road test of the year. Vanderbilt travels down to Old Turner Field and takes on the Georgia State Panthers. So, Trevor, right now, just need a little vibe check. How are we feeling?
Dude, vibe check, 11 out of 10. Doors look sensational. Vibes Saturday were sensational. And absolutely, for Vanderbilt playing an FCS team, what an absolutely stellar crowd we had on the home side. Obviously, it wasn't great on the away side because Alcorn State didn't bring a lot of people. But on our side, dude, shout out to the crowd. That was an amazing crowd on our side. The vibes were through the roof. The beer was flowing. The boys were buzzing. The pads were popping. The jaws were dropping. I love Vandy football right now. And we talked about this before we started the pod, dude. After just numerous pods of just not talking sports, it feels so good to talk actual ball.
And we're back for a while. That's the part. It's great to have a positive start to football season, which Vanderbilt has had, of course. So you have some excitement, but just keep in mind, there's also excitement right around the corner with basketball season.
Absolutely.
A lot more than last year, and that carries on into 2025. So we have a lot of Vanderbilt sports to cover over the upcoming months. But we have the Alcorn State recap. I want to be sure to pronounce that correctly. I wanted to fit this in, speaking of pronunciations. My dad sent me a picture of Vanderbilt's name pronunciation guide for Junior Cheryl. It has been updated from Sherelle to Cheryl. Nice. So back to how we were initially pronouncing it.
Good.
So for the last episode and a half, me and Trevor have been mispronouncing Junior Cheryl's name, apparently. So it updated from a pronunciation of, I think it was EHL or EL, to a pronunciation of UHL. I can't remember how they did it, but it's pronounced Cheryl, according to their latest updated media guide.
Was the PA guy also saying Sherelle? Yes.
But that's because that's how it was written in the pronunciation guide. So he was pronouncing it, but I'm sure it was one of those things my dad said.
Based on the information,
that's got to be one of those things that his family contacted Vanderbilt and was like, "Hey, by the way, that's wrong." Like if they were pronouncing yours Hulan.
Yeah.
Like how I was.
It's like, hey guys, last year you had it right.
Or mine with Byrum. That's a common one. So
Byrum.
People love pronouncing it Byrum.
From now on, you are Will Byrum and I am Trevor Hulan.
But we're still in the intro here. So we get a lot to get to in episode 281. So we're recording late. Me and Trevor wanted to watch the first hour or so of the presidential debate. Huge waste of time.
Yeah.
Massive waste of time. We should have just recorded at 8, like was our initial plan, but we wanted to be informed citizens.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that is not what the debate was for
No.
at all. It was basically a WWE clown show
Yeah.
of two idiots conversating back and forth and not responding to the questions posed to them. These are your options,
Yes.
America. We're going to hell in a handbasket.
Yeah. Dude, democracy is dying, but the doors are coming. So at the end of the day, I'm okay.
I'm okay.
I'm
It's funny
okay.
because you're watching some men that lean two different directions on the political spectrum.
Yes.
And both of us are staring at each other and saying, we are F star ED'd
Yeah.
right now.
This is truly the that we talk about it all the time, the duality of TDR. You try and stay locked in, try and be a realist, gold colored glasses, lean two different ways politically for the most part. This is just opposites truly do attract, brother.
Yep.
Opposites do attract.
And we'll let you guys figure out who leans which direction.
I think you
based
can tell
on-
by the mustache which way I lean.
There we go. We have a lot to get into on episode 281. Before we get into all of that, don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at The Door Report. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Our podcast is available on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and Google Podcasts. Excuse me.
Bless you.
And while you're at it, give our podcast 5 stars and a review on iTunes and comment on that YouTube channel. We love seeing those comments pour in. It's now time for segment 1.
My boy.
Welcome back into The Door Report, episode 281, segment 1 here. Me and Trevor, we listened to the small amount of complaints that we had last week and our relatively late release of episode 280, recording on our scheduled normal time slot of Wednesday evenings, episodes releasing early Thursday mornings. We listened, and we are now recording the remainder of football season and the foreseeable future on Tuesday evenings without any future scheduling conflicts. Tuesday evenings, so episodes in the future will be releasing Wednesdays. Might catch some people by surprise this round.
TDR cares. TDR is for the people, by the people. We listen to the people. We should run a presidential ticket.
Might as well at this
Might as well, dude. We could be the Trump
The revolution.
RFK.
Will be the revolution party,
Dude.
and it will be televised.
Maybe RFK is the one that's eating dogs.
I can't believe he said that on the debate
They're
stage.
eating the pets, Phoebe.
He said openly, Trump might have had the quote of the night, and just in one sentence said, "They're eating the dogs," and just silence. Nothing after that for a solid couple seconds. Incredible.
Will and I just sat on our couch and just looked at each other, and we're like,
I couldn't.
I cannot believe this is happening right now.
I couldn't believe what I was seeing. But me and Trevor are recording on Tuesdays. If it was possible to record on Mondays, we would try.
Yeah.
It is not possible with my schedule. I have a very important conflict. I have co-ed softball on Mondays.
Yeah.
So
And Monday Night Football. The Eagles do play Monday Night Football.
I am
this week.
sacrificing some Monday Night Football watching ability. I did get to catch the last half of the Jets-Niners, but that was not a great football game. But moving on, we have some Vanderbilt football to talk about, not politics and not NFL. Vanderbilt beats Alcorn State 55-0. Vanderbilt opened as 31.5-point favorites on Saturday morning, blew that line out of the water. Vanderbilt dominated on both sides of the football.
I made some money on that. Did you make some money on that?
I made some money on that.
Hell yeah, dude.
I bet that early. That was a crazy low line. I said my estimated line, I think I said it on the podcast, was
believe so.
37.5 or 38.5. Vegas came in about 7 points under that, which
Yeah.
is kind of shocking. And Vanderbilt went out there and dominated, as we expected. What was your prediction again last week?
Lord, I think I said 48-6.
48-6. That sounds
That
maybe
sounds
right.
I don't remember. I could have. I think I also might have said 50 or something. Maybe 52.
I
6.
think I said 41-3.
Yeah.
I think that was mine. So I underestimated Vanderbilt's offensive output and underestimated Vanderbilt's defensive capability, or I overestimated Alcorn State's offensive capability. That may have been more of the case.
A myriad of options.
Yeah. I would say, and I'm going to ask you the same question, I would say overall, like one sentence review of the game. Like, what would be your takeaway? I'll give you mine. Like, just some very quick takeaways, and then we'll dig into it more. My quick little sentence is dominant, very vanilla, showed nothing. That would be my summary in a very short amount of words.
I mean, you basically took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say dominant performance.
Yeah, that's it. They did what you expect them to do against an inferior FCS opponent.
I'll revise. I'll say dominant in all three facets of the game.
Yep, all three phases. Vanderbilt was dominant. Let's get into the offensive box score, and let's get to some of these key performers before we get into our three key takeaways of the game. Vanderbilt on offense, Diego Pavia, no flashy numbers this go around in the FCS matchup, was able to get out of the game in the late third quarter.
I believe
around
so.
that time.
But yeah, late third, mid third.
Really no flashy, gaudy numbers from the offense in general. The defense was just so dominant and special teams was so good. Vanderbilt was set up in a lot of good situations as far as field position is concerned. And I said I wasn't going to steal your stat that you brought up, and we're going to talk about defense in a second. But this does touch on why the offensive numbers aren't that great.
Oh, dude, go on, dude. Jack my swag.
Well, it's not your swag. I found out later listening to VandySports.com and Billy Derrick. Trevor got this stat from Billy Derrick.
I jacked Billy's swag.
So credit to Billy on this one because I didn't realize it in the game. I thought they got past it. But Alcorn State never crossed the 50. Their offense never got past the 50-yard line against this Vanderbilt defense. They got very close in the fourth quarter. They got to the 49, but never crossed the 50. So good stat pull there from Billy. But Vanderbilt was in plus field position, plus territory basically the entire game. Diego Pavia, 10 of 13, 83 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. Eli Stowers also in the passing category. We'll hit on this play, I'm sure. 1 of 1 for 17 yards and a touchdown. That touchdown pass was tight end to tight end on a double reverse pass to Cole Spence. Cole Spence with his first catch of the season, his only catch of the season. Cole Spence, 1 catch for 17 yards. Getting to the rushing attack, Nate Johnson was the leading rusher.
Yeah.
On one very long 56-yard run, but Nate Johnson, 2 carries for 69 yards and a touchdown. That boy is fast.
Yeah.
Who has the quote? Who was the announcer that said that man's got getting away from the cops speed?
Oh, Gus Johnson.
Nate Johnson has getting away from the cops speed.
He was quick.
I wanted to talk about Nate Johnson briefly because I know it's Alcorn State, but he had the speed that looked like he was like in a 7 out of 10 running down the field.
Yeah.
Alcorn State's players were at an 11 out of 10, and he was creating separation when they had angles.
Yeah.
And that's the level of speed and explosive playmaking that Vanderbilt hasn't had on the front line, much less at a position with depth that their backup quarterback has speed like that.
He looked that's a great point. He looked like he was cruising. Like he didn't look like he was going full effort. As soon as he hit that corner, dude, it was a thing because he hit it on our side of the field too. We were very blessed that he was running towards us. Dude, once he hit that corner, you knew that nobody was going to stop him. And it's just like, he just flipped it into another gear. Like, I've never seen a Vanderbilt football player. You never even saw Mike Wright do that. Keyshawn, you did see Keyshawn do that, but man.
You saw Mike Wright do it against Hawaii that one time, I will say. But Keyshawn Vaughn is kind of the last player you've seen.
He looked quicker than Mike, though, too, which is wild to say. Keyshawn, that's a good pull. Yeah, you saw Keyshawn do it a lot.
And then tied with 54 yards rushing each, Cedric Alexander and A.J. Newberry. Cedric Alexander, 12 carries, 54 yards, and a touchdown with a long rush of 9 yards. A.J. Newberry, 6 carries, 54 yards, a touchdown, and a long carry of 20. A.J. Newberry looked really good on that rush he had for a touchdown. I believe his first career touchdown.
Yeah, also, shout out to Cole Spence, his first career touchdown as well.
Yep. And Diego Pavia, also 13 carries, 51 yards, and a touchdown. He was also sacked twice. I think he's still 5th or 6th in the SEC in rushing yards.
I believe so.
Even after that kind of subpar rushing performance against Alcorn. Chase Gillespie, 4 carries, 10 yards. Monty Jones, 1 carry for 5 yards. Landon Wells, 1 carry for -2 yards. Getting to receiving, not a lot of gaudy receiving stats. No receiver went over 30 yards. Tristan Brown led the squad with 3 receptions for 27 yards, had an incredible one-handed catch on the sideline. Beautiful catch, real flash from Tristan Brown. Cole Spence, that 17-yard touchdown grab. Junior Sherrill, 1 catch for 17 yards. Quincy Skinner Jr., still the team's leading receiver, led the team in receiving against Virginia Tech, 2 catches for 14 yards. Loic Fungi, still showing up in the box score, 1 catch for 9 yards. Darian Wiley, 1 catch for 8 yards. Good to see him out on the field.
Yeah, glad to have him healthy.
Eli Stowers, on top of that touchdown throw, also had 1 catch for 7 yards. And then Cedric Alexander, 1 catch for 1 yard. Trevor, you were in the stadium. We were both in the stadium, tailgating it all day. Incredible time in Lot 2.
Dude.
If you didn't stop by Lot 2, you missed out. Sipping on some ice cold Outlaws all day. Miller on the grill.
We had 2 quad boxes going. We had an octabox.
It was incredible.
Basically, dude, the vibes were immaculate.
Chef Miller has perfected the tailgate setup.
Yeah.
2 TVs with multiple quad boxes. We've got it going on a lot too.
Dude, there's just something about a Miller burger or a Miller dog too, dude, that I'm just like.
We're getting off track here. We also had some Alcorn State fans say they were going to come to our tailgate and said they were going to be there. We would have welcomed them with open arms. We're welcoming people.
Yeah, we would have been like, yeah, cool, dude. Stop by, get some food.
They did not show up.
No, they did not. Before we get to the game, dude, we got to shout out the unsung hero of Vandy football. It's the man in the white cap for the Vandy band. Dude, that guy was my arch nemesis last year for a while. Every time they would come to Lot 2, I would beg him to play an encore of Dynamite, and he would wave me off. He'd be like, no, we're on a tight schedule, only 1 Dynamite. He eventually played us 2 against Virginia Tech. He played it twice. He comes back for Alcorn State. He turns around. They played Dynamite the first time. He turns around. He addresses the crowd, and he goes, it's only weird if it doesn't work. And last week it worked. He goes, and then he just turns back to the band, and he goes, again. It was electric. I love that man now.
It was beautiful. Lot 2 was great. Great time. We don't have a tailgate for a while until we hit October, unfortunately.
Sucks, dude.
But we'll see you for the Alabama game. Trevor, I just read off the offensive box score stats. What was your overall impression of the offense?
Super vanilla, which I'm okay with. Like we said in the preview, they could have, as long as they remember how to put on their helmets, then they're going to go out and whip those guys. I'm okay with keeping it vanilla. I'm okay with not putting a lot on tape. And I'm really glad with how early they put in a lot of, not your reserve guys, but really your second and third string guys. They didn't wait till the second half. A lot of those guys got snaps early in the game on both sides of the ball, but we're going to stick to the offense right now. A lot of those guys got snaps early in the game. I really, really like that, because those snaps and that experience is going to be very, very important come middle and late season.
Yeah, overall, the offense was, like I said in my opening statement, incredibly vanilla. Vanderbilt showed nothing. They pulled out that reverse pass. That probably wasn't something you're going to try in a meaningful game anyway. Maybe you're setting it up for another play.
I think that's probably what that was.
That was the only even relatively creative play that you saw out of Vanderbilt. For the most part, there was almost nothing. I mean, It was the most basic offense you can possibly run, and Vanderbilt still dominated.
Yeah.
So there weren't big flash. I mean, you had the run from Mike Wright. You had the run from Newberry.
The run from Nate Johnson.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, is that?
You said Mike Joe. You said Mike Wright.
Good God. He's stuck in my head. Mike Wright just got benched too.
Yeah, I was about to say, unfortunately, I feel bad for him. I will always love Mike Wright for what he gave to this program. He's one of those guys I do wish the best of luck.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much else to say about the offense. If there's one complaint, because I didn't include it in my 3 key takeaways, I was thinking about it, but I didn't want to really have a negative takeaway because that doesn't seem fair after going out and just thoroughly dominating an opponent. I will say they tried a couple times. There were still no explosive downfield passes. They tried a couple times and were unsuccessful. The receivers were still not able to create separation. part of that might have been Alcorn State was playing to prevent those. Vanderbilt just dominated on the ground, to be honest. So it doesn't concern me necessarily yet, but it's a bit of a trend. Only 2 games into the season, and it's something we had a concern about this team going into the season. There were a lot of concerns about this team. They basically addressed almost all of those with their play through 2 games, except for explosive downfield playmaking.
Yeah.
And right now, Vanderbilt hasn't shown that the first couple games.
Yeah, I think that's one. I think another one is I think Diego Pavia took some unnecessary hits. That's you never really it's par for the course with the way this offense is set up and the type of player that Pavia is he's going to take those licks. I don't think you want those types of licks to come versus Alcorn State though.
No.
So I thought they maybe put him a little bit in unnecessary in harm's way. And it was kind of unwarranted, but
he was still getting hit when Vanderbilt had already basically completely taken control of that game.
Yes.
And Pavia was still getting put in situations where he was taking hits. So that's another good complaint that I also had. Let's move to the defense. I'm not going to read through the whole defensive box score. Obviously, I didn't go through a full game recap because that doesn't seem necessary in a 55-0 disembowelment. But Vanderbilt's defensive stats are very, very spread around this week because so many guys rotated in. Enes DeCosmo led the team in tackles with 7 total tackles, 3 solo tackles. Prince Colley is a real human being, a real person, a real player that plays football on the football field for the Vanderbilt Commodores. He is not a figment of our imagination.
I thought I was in a fever dream whenever I saw number 20 go out there on defense. I go, is this actually Prince Colley? Or is this just some other player wearing a number 20 jersey that says Colley on the back? I could not believe my eyes.
Prince Colley played a significant number of snaps. That was great to actually see him out on the field and recorded the only sack for Vanderbilt this game. Wataha also with 4 tackles, CJ Taylor, Bradley Mann, Miles Capers, each with 3. CJ Taylor also had 1.5 tackles for loss, Miles Capers with half a tackle for loss, Randon Fontenette and Brian Longwell, each with half a tackle for loss as well, and Jeffrey Hugo with the tackle for loss. I won't run through the rest of that box score. Overall, the takeaways are pretty easy. The defense was absolutely dominant. Completely dominant the entire game.
Yes.
They held Alcorn State to 31 yards passing. They held Alcorn State rushing to 40 yards rushing. The defense was just dominant.
Yeah. And similar to what I said with the offense, they got a lot of guys in on the defense early. A lot of those second and third stringers, they got them snaps early and often. Shout out to CJ Taylor, had a big pick, and shout out to our boy Taco Wright. Pick 6, carried a man like 7 yards into the end zone. That was awesome to watch. I don't know if you have this stat, but I believe that's Taco Wright's first career score. That was awesome to see. He jumped that route perfectly. Martell Height obviously have a great game, but he's going to be the star of the show whenever we really break this down.
Yeah, defense was dominant. I forgot to mention the interceptions. Great interception by Taco Wright.
Yeah.
Great to see that guy get a pick and get in the end zone.
That was
Clark
awesome.
Lee addressed that in his press conference and being asked some questions. Good to see CJ Taylor get an interception. Didn't like how he was tackled.
That scared me.
Thank God he bounced up. I think it was Brian Longwell got in there and tipped the pass.
I think so. Yeah, you shot to Brian Longwell, 2 deflected passes.
But the defense was, I'm trying to think of another word, dominant. I mean, there was a point late in the third, early in the fourth quarter. I think it was early in the fourth or halfway through the fourth, that if Alcorn State got a point for every single yard they had gained, Vanderbilt would have still been in the lead.
Yeah.
And I think that was in the fourth quarter because they gained like 20 yards on that last drive of the game.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of other notes about the defense just because clearly Vanderbilt was more talented than Alcorn State. They were just better at every single position across the board. You have anything else on the defense?
Are we gonna discuss special teams at all in regards to?
That's one of my keys.
Okay,
that's one of my key takeaways is about special teams. But yeah, overall,
the defense just. They didn't do anything wrong. They played for all intents and purposes. The defense played a perfect game.
Yeah, I wanted to see if you had anything else to say before I moved on to maybe my final complaint that I also almost included in my key takeaways, which was very uncharacteristic of a Clark Lea team. There were a lot of penalties.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of penalties. Some of those were later in the game, but there were a lot of sloppy penalties that in a game against better competition may have been more costly. And then once again, dropped interceptions.
Yeah.
Dropped interceptions has been a trend. Dericky Wright, it was tipped, but Dericky Wright dropped one, and then Dante Carter dropped an easy interception. So through 2 games, Vanderbilt has dropped 4 interceptions. That cannot happen moving forward. I don't really know how you fix that. I mean, they're working on ball drills.
I guess
practice.
jugs machines.
I don't know. So they just have to be better and focus on making those plays. They're in the right spots. Make the play. You're in the right spot. Make the play.
But hey, I don't want to be the sunshine pumper once again. But last year we would have been like, man, they're getting close. They're getting close to making turnovers. They're the pass breakups are doing really well. That's awesome. And so like now we totally transitioned where you got to pick that off, man. You got to take that back. And so it's a great problem to have. But you're right. As I drop my pen, as you get into conference play, I think that could really bite you in the butt because one dropped interception, next play could be a tutter or a chunk play, and you don't want that. You got to capitalize on those.
I mean, you kind of saw that at the end of the Virginia Tech first half. With those 2 dropped interceptions, Virginia Tech turns it into 3 points, and then all of a sudden you have a completely different ball game headed into the second half. So that's something you have to clean up. Penalties, dropped interceptions. I just have written down on special teams, and we'll hit on it more in the keys. I just wrote down solid. That was overall more than solid.
They were exceptional.
Yeah, I didn't want to hit on that too much because it is in my keys.
Okay.
So,
I would really like to discuss special teams
right.
so we can talk about it whenever we get to your keys.
You want to get to our 3 key takeaways now?
Hell yeah.
You want to start it out?
Perfect.
You got it.
I saw my first key takeaway from the game is I saw a lot of good things from a lot of young kids. And I think, as we talked about earlier, I think that's really, really good. Get those kids, especially utilizing the rule that these kids can play 4 games and still hold on to a red shirt. I think that's crucial. Get them in, let them get a lot of experience, let them get a lot of snaps in real games. That is going to be valuable once you get into late October, November. I think that's really going to help this Vanderbilt defense. I think it's really going to help the offense too, because eventually you're going to need somebody like Tristan Brown to step up. I get it. He's young. I get it. He's a freshman. You're going to need him to step up. You're going to need AJ Newberry to step up. You're going to need somebody. God forbid we don't have any more injuries in the secondary, but eventually you're going to need somebody like Jalen Lackey to step up. Steven Seniola is probably going to be the starting safety next year. You need to get him real-time reps. I think it was good to see a lot of those guys get meaningful snaps, and a lot of them.
I was going to mix up the order that I was doing my keys. I agree with everything you just said about the young guys getting snaps and good for depth. I was going to mix it up and put special teams number 1. I'm just going to do that.
Yeah.
So that we don't. But it was initially my key number 3, but I just have it written down as special teams, and special teams. Because so far through 2 games, they've been outstanding. Punting, kicking, and returning has been a massive step forward. I know Brock Taylor missed that 1 kick to win the game against Virginia Tech. I understand that. Outside of that, he's kicking 80%. He's 4 or 5 this year.
From distance, from a ways.
Mirko looks great
Yeah.
as the punter. He looks everything is advertised. You got another guy in the transfer portal. Great job by the staff securing another quality punter that looks very good. The added bonus, the star, the thing that is the reason I have it written down 3 times that Vanderbilt has not had in so long is Vanderbilt has a punt returner for the first time in a long time. That used to be a staple of Vanderbilt football. It has been a long time since Vanderbilt just hasn't had a guy back there that we're just praying catches the punt.
Yeah.
And now they have a guy that I am more than confident he's going to catch the punt. I think he's going to do something with it. He did it against Virginia Tech to set Vanderbilt up for that field goal that they eventually missed and ended up going into overtime. And he took a kick to the house against Alcorn State this past weekend. And there were a couple he was damn close to breaking it for a touchdown. So Martell Height back there at punt returner is why this is my key number 1. Special teams could be the difference for this team in a couple games when it comes down to it.
Absolutely, man. And I'm glad you hit on that because I really want to shout out Martell Height. He has been I didn't really have any expectations for him going into the season. I thought that the punt return game was probably going to be a weakness for Vanderbilt. Martel Hyde is sensational in the punt return game. He is amazing. I get it's only through 2 games, but every time he catches that ball and he's in space, he looks like he's going to make a play. And bold take, I wouldn't be shocked if he has another 2 kick returns for touchdowns. I think that's a very real. I also loved his quote about, he's like, I just kind of think of it as playing tag. I think that's awesome. He's a special talent right there. And shout out to that kid that was put in a tough place last year, just kind of thrown to the wolves, and has really come along not only as a defensive back, which he's been really good at through 2 games, but also as a punt returner. I mean, he's shining.
Yeah. Special teams can make all the difference for a team right on the margin, like Vanderbilt. So, Trevor, what's your key takeaway number 2?
My key takeaway number 2 is I thought here we go. The run game was obviously good, and most of Vanderbilt's offensive production came from the run game. I think what you saw against Alcorn State is that not only do you have your lead horse in Cedric Alexander, but behind him, you got some guys that are also pretty darn good as well. I think Cedric Alexander is elusive. I think he's quick, and I think he runs downhill with a lot of power. I think everything that you like in a back, he has. And I think behind him, I think A.J. Newberry showed a lot of flash and could really come along as a quality RB2. Great quickness, super elusive, has amazing straight line speed. I think AJ Newberry is going to get more involved in this offense as the season progresses, and I think that's really good for Vanderbilt. I think they have an amazing RB1, and I think they have a really good RB2.
I'm going to flip mine to a much more broad statement,
Okay.
kind of on track with what you were saying. But this was my initial key takeaway number 1. This is the main thing that I actually took away from the game. And this might be obvious. Vanderbilt's talent is so much better, and it has improved year over year underneath Clark Lee. And the best example of that is when that discrepancy in level of talent is most evident, and that is your FCS opponent. And I know the last couple of years that the opponents have been a little bit lower tier relative to what I'm about to name off. So I know that. So I'm adding that caveat. But year 1 under Clark Lee, Vanderbilt played ETSU and lost that game 23-3. Year 2 under Clark Lee, Vanderbilt played Elon, won that game 42-31, gave up 31 points to FCS Elon. Year number 3, Clark Lee played Alabama A&M, won that game 47-13. And it did not feel like a 47-13 victory. That was a ball game at halftime, and Vanderbilt pulled away in the second half. Alcorn State, year 4, Vanderbilt comes out, dominates them from the opening snap. There was never a doubt how massive that talent gap was between Vanderbilt and Alcorn State. So that's my number 1 takeaway, is this roster's overall talent from player 1 to player 85 is so much better than it has been in previous years underneath Clark Lee.
I think that's a great point.
So that's kind of very broad, but number 1 is just the talent level on Vanderbilt teams, even when they were good under Derek Mason. They had a first 22 guys that were really good. And after that, there was no depth. This team has athletic depth that is built for the future, and they seem to be able to identify guys in the transfer portal now that fit into their system. So this is a positive outlook, and what this does is it's reported they had solid NIL investment this offseason for the first time, putting them around the middle of the pack of the SEC, not at the bottom of the pack. And the idea, I think, from those donors was, show us what you can do with this money before we pledge more.
Yeah.
And if Vanderbilt can continue to show, look, we actually have funds to be a middle of the pack SEC team. We are now a middle of the pack SEC team with talent. Imagine what we could do with a little more money. That's the pitch now. So continuing to expand talent, continuing to win, and to show that you were making the proper moves with the roster. And a lot of that is on Barton Simmons.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. I love that point. I totally agree. My key takeaway number 3 is I really like what Clark Lee is doing on the defense, but I'm going to get specific. I think that Clark Lee is aggressive on the defense in a way that we haven't seen a Clark Lee defense so far. I get this is his first time being the actual defensive coordinator of the team, but I think what's interesting is I think you're seeing a philosophy shift from what Clark Lee wants and how he likes to play defense as opposed to how Nick Howell liked to play defense. And with that being said, I think they're much more aggressive with how they pressure the quarterback. Now, I get they only had 1 sack in this game, but whenever you look at their defensive front and the different formations they run a lot of blitzes. They run a lot of stunts. And not only that, they run a lot of simulated pressure. So specifically, like if you look at Randon Fontenette, whenever I went back and I watched the Virginia Tech game and the Alcorn State game, I noticed this. What they use him a lot for is he's in a sprinter stance like he's going to blitz. And then he just drops back into cover. So they're utilizing simulated pressure really, really well. So whenever that quarterback IDs Randall Fontenette looks at his footwork, he's like, okay, he's going to come. He drops back. That confuses the quarterback. That also confuses the offensive line and frees up other gaps for your linebackers and your guys in the trenches. I think Clark Lee is doing a really masterful job whenever it comes to X's and O's in terms of aggressiveness on the defense.
I like that your key number 3 was defense because my key number 3 is also going to be defense.
Dude, we're so locked in.
I'm going to get a little more specific. Remember, this was initially my key number 2. So a little bit not as locked in. But my key number 3 here, the defense has a chance to be special, more specifically the run defense. So far, the run defense hasn't just been good from Vanderbilt. It has been thoroughly dominant. 30 carries for 75 yards from a run-dominant Virginia Tech team.
With a damn good running back.
Mm-hmm.
Damn good running back.
And then you look at this game, 29 carries for 40 yards from Alcorn State. So far, Vanderbilt has given up 115 yards rushing on 70 carries.
Mm-hmm.
70 carries for 115 yards. That's damn good run defense. I don't care if half that competition is Alcorn State. Partially, it's being forgot. Virginia Tech's not a scrub ball club. I had this written
That's
down.
like less than 2 yards a carry, isn't it? My math? Yeah, less than 2 yards a carry.
And I have it written down here. Virginia Tech went on to beat Marshall 31-14 this past weekend. So Virginia Tech's not a bad football team.
No.
That narrative was dispelled. They dominated Marshall. So we'll see how Virginia Tech does the rest of the season, but that Vanderbilt run defense specifically has a chance to be special. That's my key takeaway number 3.
I love that takeaway.
Well, that's our takeaways. Any last thoughts on this Alcorn State performance and Alcorn State win?
I mean, really, we've hit on everything. I thought in all 3 facets of the game and all 3 phases of the game, Vanderbilt played a perfect game, and they came out healthy and didn't put a lot of things on tape. I don't know how there's anything you could be disappointed about other than probably the penalties. But that's something that, you can clean that up. It's not an easy fix, but that's one of those things you're like, yeah, it's fixable.
Yep. Penalties and dropped interceptions on defense. That's about the only complaints. And those are really, really, really nitpicking on that. So we're going to grab ourselves a delicious cold beverage. You should do the same. Go to your fridge, grab a delicious cold water, delicious cold soda, delicious cold beer, whatever you would like, or pour yourself up a whiskey because we are about to take the TDR cocktail break and we will be right back. Welcome back into episode 281 of The Door Report. Phoebe, cut it out.
She is playing with the shaker.
Perfect. We still have up the Georgia State preview, our 3 keys to the game, and predictions. It is already late, so we might try to speed this up a little bit. It's 10 p.m.
10 o'clock.
So we will do this. It won't be quick. I'm lying. But we're going to try to make this as quick as possible. We don't know a ton about Georgia State yet. a couple semi-mixed performances overall, I would say. But the game against Georgia State, at Georgia State, thank you, Derek Mason.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mason.
Playing at Turner Field in Atlanta. I will be in attendance. Me and my dad are traveling down on Friday. I will be in the stadium supporting the boys in black and gold. Fake fan Trevor will not.
I will be at my parents' residence watching the game with my father.
Coward. Game kicks off at 6:30 p.m. on ESPN Plus. Georgia State hailing from the Sun Belt Conference, by the way.
Sun Belt, Fun Belt. You know what they say, brother.
Might as well start out with this. Vanderbilt. Let's start out with this. Vanderbilt opened up as a 9.5-point favorite.
Insane.
Over Georgia State. On the road, I'll give that granted to the odds makers. On the road, 9.5. It's already not ballooned out, but it's already expanded out to now Vanderbilt's a 10.5-point favorite. That's not an insignificant point to give in gambling. So it did quickly move out. The over-under set at 46.5. I'm surprised. Thinking about it, I was shocked at first. Thinking about it more, I'm not as surprised because I was 7 points off my estimated line on the Vanderbilt Alcorn State game, where I said it would be about 38.5, and they had it at 31.5. I would have thought the line would release at Vanderbilt minus 13.5, minus 14.5, and then it would expand out to 16.5 or 17.5. I think now it's going to be at 9.5 and maybe get out to 12.5. So I'm very different than Vegas on how I'm odds making for Vanderbilt. Maybe some of that is gold colored glasses. Maybe some of that is their ranking system and algorithm system is a little outdated with this Vanderbilt roster.
Yeah, thanks for the free money, nerds. I put a lot of money on Vanderbilt minus 9.5, and I will be eating 2 Captain D's meals with my gambling winnings after the Vanderbilt Commodores win. Actually, no, I'll probably go to Crystal and get a steamer pack with my gambling money.
Ooh, or both with the amount of money you're going to win.
Dude, I might go to Captain D's and Crystal.
Dude, we're going to throw some Jack in the Box in there, brother.
Dude, whenever the Rivergate Crystal sees me pull up at the drive-thru, just know you better go ahead and start preparing 24 crystals for me.
Get those grills ready, pal.
The one lady back there doing all of it at like 10 at night is going to be like, oh, my God.
But really, I don't understand that 9.5-point line. I'm trying not to see things through gold-colored glasses, but let's run through what Georgia State has done this year. We all know what Vanderbilt has done this year so far. Georgia State week 1 played Georgia Tech. It was a solid football team. They're not good. They're not great. They might not even be good, but they're solid.
Yeah.
They lost to Georgia State 35-12. They then proceeded in week 2. They took on their FCS opponent of the year, UT Chattanooga.
Go Mocs, dude.
The Moccasins, they are number 10 in the country in FCS. They're a good FCS football team this year. Georgia State squeaked by them, 24-21. Probably should have lost, but 24-21 ball game, had a lot of things break their way. But Georgia State is not what Georgia State was last year.
No.
I think that's what's being calculated into this line. And when people are replying to our Twitter or replying to me about when I said I'm shocked or don't understand the line, people are viewing Georgia State as the Georgia State that they have been the last 4 or 5 years. And that is not the Georgia State that Vanderbilt is playing on Saturday.
Yeah. And two, a lot of people, I've seen this on a couple of message boards. I've even seen it on Twitter. A lot of people are drawing comparisons to the game Vanderbilt had last year on the road against UNLV, a game that they should have won against a team that, for all intents and purposes, whenever you just go composite rankings, was less talented than that Vanderbilt squad. And Vanderbilt lost that game. Turns out that UNLV team was much better than we thought they would be, and Vanderbilt was much worse than we thought they would be. With that being said, last year's UNLV team would absolutely beat the brakes off this year's Georgia State team, and this year's Vandy team would have beat the brakes off last year's UNLV team. I get the skepticism because it is like battered Vandy fan syndrome. Like I get it, always seeing the worst outcome, but we'll get into it. I think Vanderbilt wins very handedly as long as they just play their game. What'd I say?
Handily.
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 There we go. Yeah, it is battered Vanderbilt fan syndrome, and I'm going to hit on some of those points because that's what I am. But on your point about UNLV and the comparisons being drawn, UNLV last season was better than everyone expected.
Yeah, they were
and
good.
This year, UNLV opening week of the season, week 1, Vanderbilt beat Houston 27-7, and then went on to beat their FCS opponent Utah Tech 72-14 in week 2. So UNLV is one of the best group of 5 teams in the country, and that's who Vanderbilt lost to last year.
Yeah,
this Georgia State team is not that. They were not that last year. And they lost everything from their roster last year. That's an overused phrase.
Yeah.
They lost everything from their roster last season, from their team last season. They lost their entire coaching staff from last season.
In February.
Yes, their longtime head coach, Sean Elliott, left in February to be the tight end coach at South Carolina. He was replaced by their new head coach, Del McGee, from Georgia, who I actually think is going to be a good coach.
Hell of a recruiter when he was at Georgia.
Thrust into a tough situation. He was with Kirby Smart at Georgia since he began there in 2016. Was the running backs coach there for 3 years until he was moved to assistant coach and run game coordinator in 2019, where he has been until he moved to the Georgia State job this season. But on top of the coaching changes, Georgia State also lost their best wide receiver from last season, Robert Lewis, moved on to Auburn. They lost their star running back from last season, Marcus Carroll, who's now at Missouri. They lost their star offensive lineman, Montavious Cunningham, to Virginia Tech. They lost their star cornerback, Bryquise Brown, to Boston College. And they lost their longtime star quarterback, Darren Granger, to graduation. So this entire offense from Georgia State was gutted. Their defense lost talent as well. Their defense wasn't good to begin with. Their team was okay to begin with. That's the part, is they were okay last year. They were solid. They were okay. They're a solid program. They lost everything.
They went 6-6 in the Sun Belt, I believe. Is that correct?
They went 6-6 and ended the game on a 5-game losing streak prior to their bowl game, which they beat. I think it was Utah State. They beat pretty handily. So they ended the year 7-6. But this is a whole new roster. Forget that team from last year. They went 7-6, but I think Vanderbilt beats the roster from last year this season.
Absolutely.
So that's where I'm kind of sitting. They did bring some guys in the portal. They brought in some offensive linemen, specifically on the left side. They brought in some transfers at the quarterback and running back position, but those aren't the guys that are starting. They brought in a transfer quarterback from Georgia Tech and Zach Gibson. That's not their starter. Christian Velux.
I don't know how to pronounce that kid's name.
From Pitt. He was previously at Penn State, at Pittsburgh last year. He's now their starting quarterback. They brought in a running back from Coastal Carolina named CJ Beasley, but he's not playing at all. Their starting running back is Freddie Brock. So overall, they're just a completely gutted and reinvented Georgia State team. So this whole idea of, it's a scary team, Georgia State's solid, I agree. A program that is historic, or at least the past few years has seen success, is a little scarier than a team like Ball State that Vanderbilt has later in the schedule. They scare me more than Ball State, but this is not a good Georgia State football team.
No.
And if Vanderbilt plays how they are capable of playing, or even 50% of that capability, they will win.
Absolutely.
But this is not a game. If Vanderbilt comes out and plays badly and the ball doesn't bounce their way and they play badly, they can lose this game.
I do agree with that.
Yeah, this is not the same as how we previewed Alcorn State. There is a scenario, and there is a real Georgia State podcast that could be doing keys to the game, that there is a scenario and way that this game plays out that Vanderbilt loses. And that's why we're getting a little bit more in detail than we did last week.
Yeah. And typically I'm not the stats guy. Will is the stats guy, but I busted out some advanced analytics. We're going to be talking about EPA, composite rankings, all that fun stuff. To give a little bit more insight to this Georgia State team, according to 24/7 and composite rankings, to where they rank all players on active rosters. For a little context, 24/7 has Vandy as the 50th most talented team in the nation. Now, of course, are composite rankings all that matter? No, absolutely, because a lot of these kids that Vanderbilt are actually playing at a higher level than what 24/7 has them rated as. So this doesn't tell the whole story, but it does give you a glimpse into the roster construction for both teams. So according to 24/7, Vandy has the 50th most talented team in the nation. Georgia State has the 90th most talented team in the nation. Their highest rated guy in terms of composite scores is Swint. He is a linebacker transfer from Clemson, was a 3-star transfer from Clemson, not a 4-star, but was a 3-star within the portal. Now we're going to get to expected points added. EPA, if you follow advanced analytics, you are very familiar with the stat. EPA is good. The higher your EPA is, the more offensive production you have, the more expected points you add on offense. Shout out to Parker Fleming on Twitter. If you guys love college football, which if you're listening to us, you absolutely do, and you don't follow Parker Fleming on Twitter, you're missing out. He does wonderful stuff with advanced analytics. In terms of EPA, Vanderbilt is ranked 49. Now it's only 2 games. Vanderbilt is ranked 49th in the nation in terms of EPA. So they're in the top 50 through 2 games. That's pretty good. Georgia State, 102nd in the nation, with a game against Georgia Tech, which is a tough team. I think Georgia Tech is a really, really good I don't know, really, really good. I think they're a good football team. I think they're a bowl team. This also accounts for the game they had against the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga. They are in the red in all EPA stats in terms of offense, offensive passing production, run production, drop back percentage. They are in the red. They are not good on offense. And the stats reflect that. And as Will's mentioned, Vanderbilt so far, especially in the run defense and just totally on defense, is much improved. We'll get into our score prediction. That's just a little glance into the difference between the 2 teams. I don't think this is going to be a close football game.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull up Georgia State's previous schedule here and their previous matchups.
Now, if you want me to go on a little rant while you're doing that, I can.
Yeah, go on a little rant here.
Now, with that being said, Georgia State does have some athletes on. Like, I think their running back Freddie Brock, he's not like an all-time talented guy, and he's certainly not going to be the best running back that Vanderbilt has already faced. Tootin is the best running back. You could make the argument he might be a top 3 running back on this schedule that Vanderbilt's going to face. So they've already faced a better running back. They've already faced a better offensive line. I think Freddie Brock he's very quick. I watched the Alcorn State game against UTC. He is very quick, has really good lateral side-to-side quickness. But still, with the dogs Vanderbilt has, especially in the trenches, I think you should lock him up pretty good.
We'll see if I sneeze. I feel a sneeze incoming here. I just wanted to get the box scores pulled up for Georgia State. It's the one thing I didn't have pulled up in my 10,000 tabs up here is their box scores from the previous games, and I'd completely forgotten to look at it. On the defensive side of the ball, I don't think I hit on this. This might be hitting on some of my keys, but they've got some decent corners, some decent athletes on the outside. They're very light on the inside. Their defensive line is very light.
Small.
This is a very small. We're only 2 games into the season. So, and one of those is an FCS opponent. So I was about to say it's by far the smallest defensive line Vanderbilt has seen. But Alcorn State was worse.
Yeah.
But, I mean, this is a way lower level of athlete than what they faced against Virginia Tech. And they were able to run the ball against Virginia Tech. Granted, some of it's on film now, but this defense for Georgia State is not something – they're not awful, but it's not something that Vanderbilt hasn't seen a much superior version of already.
Absolutely. That's a great way to put it.
So I wanted to hit on one thing on offense for Georgia State. Sorry, I was a little zoned out on what exactly you ranted off there, so if I'm repeating it, just stop me.
No, you're straight.
This is the first matchup that Vanderbilt has played against an opponent this season that is a primarily pass-first offense. So I know you talked about EPA and efficiency. They throw a ton of things behind the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
So a lot of these passes are not downfield, but it's quick stuff.
Yeah.
To the outside, Vanderbilt has played a team in Virginia Tech that primarily runs the football, and they take their shots off that run. They played Alcorn State, who's a run-heavy FCS team. And then you're playing a team that runs that quick game stuff. So it is a big shift for that defense to get into the zone of playing a completely different style of offense than what Georgia State does. Because I was able to go back. You showed me some highlights of the UTC game. I went back and watched some of that Georgia State game. They throw the ball a lot.
Yeah.
It's a big change. They what's the classic term? they use the pass game as a run game.
Yeah.
I think they're just getting their guys out in space. So it's going to be a challenge to those guys on the outside for the first time this year. Can guys like Martell Height, who's a little bit undersized at that corner position, can he come up and make plays? Can Randon Fontenette get side to side like we expect him to and make those plays? Are we going to see Colby Taylor, who's supposedly back, but he's not listed on the depth chart?
Well,
he's available to play, but is he going to play? That's a guy that could be key in a game like this against he's long, lanky, athletic, can defend side to side. So
Tyson Russell.
Yep, this is a much different team than Vanderbilt has played the past 2 weeks.
And two, I think the way their offense is set up, it's not super similar to what Virginia Tech's offense is built like, but I think what Vanderbilt saw against Virginia Tech is they did throw it downfield a good bit, but a lot of their stuff was behind the line of scrimmage. They ran a lot of those bubble screens. They ran a lot of stuff behind the line of scrimmage, and Georgia State does something similar. So Vanderbilt has already faced a team that likes to do that. And one of the passes that Vanderbilt, shout out Taco Wright, took back for a pick six was one of those screens to where Vanderbilt was aggressive and was able to jump that and take that for 6. So obviously Alcorn State didn't do a ton of it, but Va Tech did a lot of it. And so they have experience with that sort of similar offensive philosophy to this point.
Yeah, last year this type of offense would have terrified me. Honestly, going into this season, this type of offense would have scared me. What I've seen the first 2 weeks, I think Vanderbilt's going to be able to shut it down.
Mm-hmm.
I think they have the athletes to get side to side specifically against this Georgia State team. So let's get into our 3 keys to the game. 3 keys to victory, we'll call them. We changed it to 3 keys to the game when Vanderbilt sucked. We used to call it 3 keys to victory. So do you want me to start or do you want to start?
You can start.
All right. I'm going to use my classic one. If Billy Derrick is listening anywhere, he's going to be laughing. Win the turnover battle. That's key number 1. Vanderbilt so far this year, you know what they've done, Trevor? They've won the turnover battle.
They're killing it in turnover differential.
That's what I wanted to bring up here. Win the freaking turnover battle. I'm going to repeat it. It is simple. Pavia sometimes this year he hasn't turned it over, but he has the tendency to, let's say, make some riskier plays.
Get a little zany with it.
Yeah, get a little zany with it. So do not do that. That's my number 1. Georgia State capitalized on turnovers against UTC. Chattanooga turned the ball over 3 times. Georgia State turned it over once. That was the difference in the ball game.
Mm-hmm.
When you go back and watch that replay. So Vanderbilt, do not turn the ball over. Win the turnover battle. Continue to create disruption and force turnovers like they've done this year. I expect them to do that.
Yeah. My first key to the game is going to be tight end involvement. All offseason, all we heard about was how great these tight ends are. And I don't think that's a lie. I think Vanderbilt has a really, really, really good, really athletic tight end room. I think Eli is great. I obviously think Cole Spence is great. I would like to see Cameron Johnson get a lot more action. Sorry, I'm about to burp, guys. I apologize. I think this is a game to where Vanderbilt could get their tight ends involved against a smaller secondary and a smaller linebacker group. They're going to have the mismatches on that side of the ball. I would really like to see Cole Spence get involved. I'd really like to see Eli get involved. And I think this would be a great catalyst to get them a little bit more involved in the game and sort of catapult them into this mid portion of the schedule and into the later schedule, getting them a little bit juicing in and a little bit more acclimated in terms of the offensive game plan.
I would like to see that as well. Going to my second one, I'm flipping to the other side of the ball. Force negative plays.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about it already. They throw the ball a lot behind the line of scrimmage. They like to do that. They don't want to throw the ball down the field. Mm-hmm. Force negative plays, make them do things they're uncomfortable doing. That will contribute to my key number 1, which is win the turnover battle. Force them to throw it down the field. Force them to do something they're uncomfortable with. Allow your guys to pin their ears back and get pressure on the quarterback. Force turnovers. So create negative plays on those bubble screens, blow them up, play them aggressively, match up with guys one-on-one with limited safety help over top, play aggressively. Don't allow them to dink and dunk down the field.
Yeah, and that goes into my key number 2 is I have soundness in the secondary. I think this is going to be a really big game for the secondary, and I think if you I think you can play sound defense, and I think you can play aggressive at the same time. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. So I think I totally agree that the secondary needs to be aggressive in terms of how they approach this game, but I also think they need to be sound because if you aren't technically sound or fundamentally sound, unfortunately, if you miss a block or you take the wrong angle, these behind the line of scrimmage passes can cause some problems for you. So I would like to see the secondary be very, very sound in how they approach this passing game.
Perfect. I'm staying on the defensive side of or I guess this is offensive side of the ball, actually. It's referring to Georgia State's defense. So forget what I just said. My key number 3, and this might be the most important key, and it's not scheme stuff, but it is a specific thing. So that's kind of what our keys are. We're not telling you how to block the scheme, but we're kind of pointing out what you have to see for Vanderbilt to win or dominate this game.
Yeah.
My key number 3 is dominate the interior. I talked about it. Georgia State's interior of their defensive line, light, small. Vanderbilt, with what they have shown this year, should be able to run the ball down Georgia State's throat. Mm-hmm. I don't think they need to do anything over the top to beat this Georgia State team. You look at their starting defensive tackles, at their best interior defensive lineman, Henry Bryant, 6 foot, 275. Dorian Royal, 6'3", 285. Those are their main interior defensive linemen. Those dudes are not tiny. I'm not saying compared to like a normal human being that those guys are small. I'm pulling up or sorting right now Vanderbilt's roster so I don't misquote this. Just keep in mind for Vanderbilt, who doesn't exactly have like the biggest, most dominant SEC defensive line, Ilanan Wataha, 6'7", 311. Then you go down to a guy even like, let's say Demarion Thomas, 6'2", 334. You go to a guy like Glenn Seabrooks, 6'3", 340. That's 50, 60 pounds different than what you're facing in SEC competition week in, week out. So Vanderbilt dominate the interior of that Georgia State defensive line and run the ball down their throats. Run through a motherfucker's face.
Dude, that's the game.
As that graphic says.
That's the game plan, baby. Dude, we are so in sync. I basically have the same key number 3 as you, except I'm on the other side of the ball. So my key number 3 is get pressure with your front 4. Like I said earlier, I love the defensive philosophy that Clark Lee and Nicholas and Lazinski are running with the defense, and in terms of how they're utilizing the linebackers, the razor. I love all of that. I think it's really, really good. I would like to see Vanderbilt get pressure with just their front 4 in this game. I think Vanderbilt has the capability to do that against not only this team, but some of the other SEC teams that we're actually going to see on the schedule. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. Kentucky has a really bad offensive line. I think Vanderbilt, whenever that game comes around, has the opportunity to get pressure on Brock Vandagriff with just their front 4. I would really, really like to see this defensive front take a step forward and get pressure on the quarterback just with their front 4 guys. But however which way a sack comes, you'll take a sack no matter what. But I'd really like to see those front 4 guys. And I'd like to see Linus Zonk has had a great start to the season. I would like to see, apparently it's Linus Zunk. I would like to see Linus Zunk continue to have a great season. I'd like to see him get a couple sacks.
Well, that's our 3 keys. It's getting late. I think it's time to get to our predictions here.
Mm-hmm.
I think based on the tone of how we are discussing this game, everybody can kind of see where we're leaning win or loss wise. Trevor, it's going to be potentially some rainy weather.
Glad you brought that up. I was going to bring that up.
Some bad weather. That may be adjusting what I have written down here as my projection. Keep in mind, Vanderbilt right now sitting as a 10.5-point favorite on the road against Georgia State. We had a ton of people reply with predictions for the game on Twitter. If you haven't yet, check out our Twitter at The Door Report. Tweet us your predictions. I was going to go through and read some of them. We have way too many to read all of them. Blake Fromang, multiple-time guest of TDR, 3-time guest of TDR, predicted if we don't win by 10.5, it's over. It's over for me.
Yeah.
Alex writes for us sometimes. Alex Kerbigov, I'm going to butcher that, at anchordown0714 said 31-10, Doors coming. A lot of in the 30s to in the 10s or teens for Vanderbilt against Georgia State is what I'm seeing. One Georgia State fan tweeted that Georgia State was going to win 31-28. He was the only Georgia State fan in our comments. I genuinely don't think they have fans.
Yeah.
We say that semi-jokingly, and it gets said about Vanderbilt a lot. This is the first time I can actually remember ever Vanderbilt not having fans, or the Door Report not having fans in our comments.
Yeah.
Even Alcorn State had a fan or two in
Yeah.
our comments. This is the first time I can remember a program or a team not having any fans tweeting at us or talking shit at all.
Yeah.
And it's an FBS opponent.
I think there probably will be more Vandy fans at that game than Georgia State fans.
I mean, it's a program that wasn't started that long ago.
No,
unless I'm incorrect.
No, you're very correct.
So those are some predictions for fans. You want to go first on yours?
Yeah, I'll go first. I don't think this is going to be close. I think as long as Vanderbilt can stay true to their game, not be stupid, I think that Vanderbilt should honestly run away with this ball game. I have the Doors winning 42-6. 42-6, Doors on top. I think it's going to be another dominant performance by Vanderbilt. Now, like you said, I'm glad you brought up the weather. If it's raining substantially, I would probably temper my expectations down to something like 31-3.
I think wet weather helps Vanderbilt.
Oh,
in
absolutely.
I think it uglies the game up, and that helps Vanderbilt in any game this season, but specifically this one against a team in Georgia State that likes to throw the ball, threw the ball 38 times against UTC, and threw the ball 34 times against Georgia Tech in their 35-12 loss. So
they threw how many times against them?
35.
Oh, goodness.
So or 34 against Georgia Tech. Too many techs.
Too many techs. We're too many technical schools in this roster preview. Or not roster preview. What the hell? It's so late. I don't even know what we're doing right now, boys.
Georgia State preview.
Georgia State preview.
So you said 42-6.
Yes, sir.
I have written down, and I'm just going to stick with my initial prediction because it's what feels right. But if it's rain, I'm going to have another caveat on there. My prediction is 38-13 Vanderbilt. I think that Georgia State will bust a couple plays in that quick action stuff. It's the first time Vanderbilt's having to defend it. I can also see Vanderbilt dominating it, but I'm trying to not be too gold-lensed glasses here. 38-13. I think Vanderbilt looks like the better team. It's not going to be a blowout at halftime. It's not going to be like how the Alcorn State game was, but I think Vanderbilt takes a 7 to 14 point lead into half and then just slowly pulls away in the second half. They're just better.
Yeah.
Vanderbilt is just better. That does not mean that Vanderbilt cannot lose this game. It's battered Vanderbilt fan syndrome, as Blake would want to say. It's okay, Will. It's
okay.
not your fault.
It's not your fault.
It's not your fault. I get that. I understand it's not my fault. But this is for real. There is a 5 to 10% chance Georgia State can win this game. I'd lean more towards the 5%. Vanderbilt has put the ball in precarious situations a lot the first two games.
Yeah.
The ball has bounced Vanderbilt's way for the most part the first two games. If that happens, eventually the ball's not going to bounce your way. If that happens this game, Vanderbilt plays poorly, they can lose. I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to dominate. I think Trevor, you're on the same page. I think most Vanderbilt fans expect a pretty dominant performance. How would you feel? What would be your expected reaction? I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah, well, before I get to that, I add, and you added the caveat as well. If there is substantial rain, I knocked it down to 31-3. Do you have a score prediction if there is substantial rain?
31-10.
Okay.
31-10. So
Okay.
just knock it down a little bit. One less field goal for them, one less touchdown for Vanderbilt. So my question was going to be, before we close that episode 281, if Vanderbilt goes in and they come out and they beat Georgia State 24-21 in a nail biter, how are you feeling after that game? This is a big time hypothetical.
Yeah, honestly, not great. Because on paper, and then again, I know football is not played on paper. It's played on grass. Anything can happen any given Saturday. That's why we love this beautiful game. If that was to happen, I would be very upset, but I wouldn't hit the panic button yet because this is a weird game. You're going to Turner Field to play a bad team, and maybe this team is looking ahead to next week whenever they got to go to Missouri and play a top 5 Missouri team for their first SEC game. I don't think it's likely, but I'm with you. I think that's a possibility if Vanderbilt is looking ahead. Now, hopefully Clark Lee and Jerry Kill have enough wisdom, which I think they do, to hammer it into those kids' heads. Do not let that happen. But I think it's a possibility. I'd be very upset, but I wouldn't hit the panic button.
Yeah, I wouldn't hit the panic button. I think that is always a possibility. Your first road test of the year. That's always a test of how a team is going to play on the road. Some teams suck on the road. So that's a test. If there's ever a head coach that understands you cannot take an opponent lightly on the road, it would be Clark Lee. And you cannot take an opponent lightly in general. He has lived it. I think I said it to you. I think I said it on the last podcast, but I think I said it to you when we were talking about previewing this.
Yeah.
If there's any benefit to what we have seen in the first 3 seasons of the Clark Lee experience, it has been that. It is this moment. I'm about as confident as I can be that a coach will beat into the brains of his players, and the players will understand, because a lot of them were here for it.
Yeah.
The players will understand you cannot take an opponent lightly, especially on the road. You just saw it last year. It can't happen.
Yeah.
So
Great
I'm
point.
confident. I think you're confident. I think most Vanderbilt fans are confident. I will be down in Atlanta for the game. If anybody's going to be out there, tweet at me. We'll link up there in Atlanta. Me and old Steve going to be headed down partying in ATL.
Whenever you go down to Atlanta before the game, have you been to the varsity yet down there? You have? Okay, I was going to recommend go to the varsity.
Varsity's great.
Yeah.
I went down there with when I was, I guess it was right before college started or in high school with actually Big T of Barstool Sports.
He's blocked me on Twitter.
Interesting.
I hate that guy.
It's actually one of my good friends.
You've actually said really nice things about him, but he is a Tennessee fan, so I legally am obligated to hate his guts.
He actually grew up a Georgia Tech fan.
Expose that fraud.
He's not a fraud. He did go to school at Tennessee, so he's not a fraud.
Fraud.
He did grow up a Georgia Tech fan. Anything else you want to add on 281 before we close it out? And I have to edit this MFer.
No, I'm excited for Vandy football, which feels weird to say.
I'm excited for Vandy football as well. Let's look forward to this Georgia State matchup. For myself, Will Byrum, and my co-host, Trevor Hulan, this has been episode 281 of The Door Report, powered by 615 Collectibles.